The warning sirens screamed through the colony ship Harmony like angry metal birds. Mira sat in her small cabin, knitting a blue sweater for her grandson back on Earth. Her wrinkled hands moved the needles with practiced ease. She had lived 73 years and had seen many things. A few loud noises would not make her panic. The door to her cabin exploded inward. 3 tall figures stepped inside. They were not human. Their skin was gray like stone, and their eyes glowed red in the dim light. They wore black armor that covered their bodies from neck to toe. Mira looked up at them and frowned. "You could have knocked," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. The aliens looked at each other. One of them pointed a strange weapon at her. It looked like a rifle, but with lights running along its side. "Human female, you are now property of the Zalrian Empire. Come with us." Mira set down her knitting needles carefully. She stood up slowly, her knees creaking a bit. "Property? Young man, I am nobody's property. I stopped being someone's property when I divorced my second husband 40 years ago." The alien did not understand her humor. He grabbed her arm roughly and pulled her toward the door. Mira stumbled, but caught herself. She was old, but still strong from years of farm work in her youth. The hallways of the Harmony were filled with smoke and flashing lights. Other humans ran past, screaming and crying. Mira saw families being separated. She saw children being pulled from their parents' arms. Her heart grew heavy, but she kept her face calm. Showing fear to bullies never helped anyone. They dragged her to the cargo bay where dozens of other prisoners stood in a group. Armed aliens surrounded them. In the center of the group, Mira saw Commander Taeyang. He was a young officer, maybe 30 years old, with kind eyes and a strong jaw. Blood ran down the side of his face from a cut above his eye. "Leave the elderly woman alone," Taeyang shouted at the aliens. "She is no threat to you." One of the aliens walked up to Taeyang and hit him across the face with the back of his hand. The commander fell to his knees. 2 other prisoners, a man and a woman, tried to help him up. The woman was Yuna, the ship's chief engineer. The man was Daehyun, the medical officer. "Silence, human," the alien said. His voice was deep and cold. "You have no power here. Your ship is now ours. Your people are now ours. You will work for the Empire, or you will die." Mira pushed through the crowd of prisoners until she stood in front of Taeyang. She looked down at him with concern. "Are you all right, young man?" Taeyang looked up at her with surprise. "Grandma Mira, you should stay back. Don't draw their attention." "Nonsense," Mira said. She pulled a handkerchief from her pocket and pressed it against the cut on his head. "Hold this here. Apply pressure. You will be fine." An alien officer approached them. He was taller than the others and wore more decorations on his armor. "What is this? An elder human playing doctor?" He laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "How amusing. Your species coddles its weak ones instead of leaving them to die." Mira stood up and looked the officer in his glowing red eyes. "Weak? I raised 5 children. Buried 2 husbands, ran a farm for 30 years, and survived the collapse of 2089. I am not weak, young man. I am experienced." The officer leaned down until his face was close to hers. His breath smelled like sulfur and metal. "You have spirit, old woman, but spirit will not save you." He turned to his soldiers. "Take the loud one to the detention cells." He pointed at Taeyang. "Take the rest to the work camps." 2 soldiers grabbed Taeyang by his arms and pulled him to his feet. He struggled against them. "No! Let me go! You cannot do this!" "And the old woman," the officer continued, a cruel smile on his gray lips. "Take her to the beast chamber. Let us see if her spirit can save her from Calyx." The other aliens laughed. Some of the human prisoners gasped. Daehyun stepped forward. "Please, no. She is just an old woman. She cannot defend herself against your war beast." "That is the point," the officer said. "Let her be an example to the rest of you. Obey the Empire or face the same fate. Two soldiers grabbed Mira by her arms. She did not struggle. She looked back at Tai Yang, who was being dragged toward a different door. Their eyes met for a moment. She gave him a small nod, as if to say everything would be all right. They took her through dark corridors. The ship she was on now was not the Harmony. They had moved her to a Zalrian vessel while she was being processed. The walls were black metal, and strange symbols glowed along the ceiling. The air was cold and smelled like oil and something else, something animal. They stopped in front of a massive door. It was made of thick steel with scratches all over its surface, deep scratches, like something with huge claws had tried to break through from the inside. One of the soldiers pressed his hand against a panel, and the door began to open with a loud grinding sound. "The beast has not been fed in 5 days," one soldier said to the other in their own language. They did not know Mira had learned to understand basic Zalrian during her years on the colony ships. "It will be quick." "Good," the other replied. "I do not enjoy watching the kills. They are too messy." They pushed Mira through the door. She stumbled and fell to her knees on the hard floor. Before she could turn around, the door slammed shut behind her. She heard the locks engage with heavy metallic clicks. Mira stood up slowly and brushed off her pants. She looked around. The chamber was huge, maybe 50 meters wide and 30 meters tall. The walls were made of the same black metal, covered in scratches and dents. In several places, the metal was scorched black, as if burned by intense fire. The floor was covered in old straw and bones. Many, many bones. In the far corner of the chamber, something moved in the shadows. Mira heard breathing, slow and deep, like a giant bellows. She saw 2 yellow eyes open in the darkness. They were as large as dinner plates and glowed with their own light. Mira took a deep breath. Her heart was beating fast now, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had faced angry bulls on her farm. She had faced tax collectors and landlords. She had faced cancer and won. She would face this too. "Well," she said out loud, her voice echoing in the huge chamber. "I suppose you must be Calyx." The breathing in the shadows stopped. The yellow eyes blinked once, slowly. Something very large began to move toward her. The creature that stepped out of the shadows was the largest living thing Mira had ever seen. It was a dragon, or at least something very much like the dragons from old Earth stories. Its body was covered in dark blue scales that looked almost black in the dim light. Each scale was the size of Mira's hand. Its legs were thick as tree trunks, and its claws scraped against the metal floor as it walked. The dragon's head was enormous, with horns that curved back from its skull like twisted metal. Its mouth was full of teeth, each one as long as a knife. Smoke drifted from its nostrils with each breath. The yellow eyes stared at Mira with an intelligence that surprised her. This was not a mindless beast. This was a thinking creature. Calyx moved closer. The ground shook slightly with each step. Mira stood still and watched it approach. Every instinct in her body told her to run, to scream, to hide. But she knew running would do no good. The chamber had no place to hide, and she was too old to run fast enough anyway. So she stood her ground and waited. The dragon lowered its massive head until it was level with Mira. Its breath washed over her, hot and smelling of ash and old meat. It opened its mouth slightly, showing those terrible teeth. A low rumble came from deep in its chest, a sound that Mira felt in her bones. "Well, go on then," Mira said. She kept her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. "If you are going to eat me, eat me. But I will tell you right now, I am old and probably very tough. You will likely get indigestion." The dragon stopped. Its eyes widened slightly. The rumbling sound stopped. It tilted its head to one side, the way a dog might when it hears something strange. Mira took advantage of the pause. Are you surprised I am not screaming? Those aliens out there probably told you I would scream. They probably enjoy watching people scream." She crossed her arms over her chest. "Well, I am not going to give them that satisfaction." Calyx pulled its head back slightly. It sat down on its haunches, still watching her. The yellow eyes blinked again. "That is better," Mira said. "Now we can see each other properly." She studied the dragon more carefully now that it was not about to eat her immediately. What she saw made her heart ache with an old, familiar pain, the pain of seeing a creature that had been hurt and neglected. The dragon was covered in scars. Long white lines ran across its scales where old wounds had healed. But worse than the old scars were the new wounds. On its left shoulder there was a deep cut that had become infected. The scales around it were crusted with dried blood and pus. On its right foreleg, several scales had been torn away, leaving raw red flesh exposed. "Oh, you poor thing," Mira said softly. "They have not been taking care of you at all, have they?" The dragon made a different sound, something between a whine and a growl. It lowered its head again, but this time it did not open its mouth. Instead, it just looked at her with those huge yellow eyes. Mira thought she saw something in those eyes. Pain, loneliness, anger, and something else. Hope, maybe. Mira slowly reached out her hand. "May I come closer? I want to look at your wounds." The dragon did not move. Mira took that as permission. She walked slowly toward it, keeping her movements smooth and predictable. This was exactly how she had approached nervous animals on her farm. Show no fear, show no aggression. Just move with calm confidence. She reached the dragon's massive leg and looked up at the infected wound on its shoulder. It was high above her head. "Can you lie down, dear? I cannot reach it while you are sitting up." For a long moment the dragon did not move. Then slowly it lowered itself to the floor. The movement made the whole chamber shake. Now its shoulder was at the level of Mira's head. "Good," Mira said. "Very good. Now, this is going to hurt a bit. That infection needs to be cleaned." She looked around the chamber. There was nothing here to work with. No water, no clean cloth, no medicine. But Mira had spent years on a farm dealing with injured animals with whatever she had on hand. She took off her cardigan sweater. It was old, but clean. She tore a strip from the bottom of it. Then she looked at the dragon. "I am going to need some heat. Can you breathe a little fire on this cloth? Just a little, mind you. I need it warm and sterile, not burned to ash." The dragon huffed, sending smoke from its nostrils. Then it opened its mouth slightly and breathed out a thin stream of fire. The flame was controlled and precise. Mira held the cloth strip at the edge of the flame until it was hot, but not burning. "Perfect," she said. "You have good control." She pressed the hot cloth against the infected wound. The dragon flinched and growled, but it did not pull away. Mira worked carefully, cleaning away the dried blood and pus. The heat from the cloth helped kill some of the infection. "I know it hurts," Mira said as she worked. "But infection hurts worse if you leave it. I learned that when my son Junho fell off the barn roof and cut his leg. I cleaned that wound every day for a week. He screamed and cried, but he healed up just fine. He is a pilot now, flying ships between Earth and Mars." The dragon made a soft, rumbling sound. It almost sounded like it was listening. "Do you have a family?" Mira asked. "Or did they take you from your home like they took us from ours?" The dragon's eyes closed slowly. When they opened again, Mira thought she saw sadness in them. "I am sorry," she said. "Whatever they did to you, I am sorry. You did not deserve it. Nobody deserves to be locked in a cage and hurt." She finished cleaning the shoulder wound and moved to the leg where the scales had been torn away. This was worse. The raw flesh was exposed to the dirty straw and bones on the floor. It must have been causing terrible pain every time the dragon moved. "This needs to be covered," Mira said. She tore more strips from her sweater and used the dragon's fire to sterilize them. Then she wrapped them around the wounded leg as best as she could. The dragon watched her work but made no sound. When she finished, Mira stepped back and looked at her work. It was not perfect, but it was better than nothing. "There. That should help a bit. You need real medicine, though, and you need to be somewhere clean." The dragon lowered its head and gently nudged Mira with its snout. The gesture was surprisingly gentle for such a huge creature. Mira reached up and patted its scaled nose. The scales were warm under her hand and surprisingly smooth. "You are welcome," she said. Her stomach growled loudly. She had not eaten since breakfast on the Harmony, and that felt like a long time ago. The dragon heard the sound and tilted its head again. "I am hungry," Mira admitted, "though I suppose there is nothing to eat in here except old bones, and I am not quite desperate enough to gnaw on those yet." The dragon stood up suddenly. Mira stumbled back, startled. Had she said something wrong? But the dragon did not move toward her aggressively. Instead, it walked to the corner where it had been sleeping when she arrived. It bent down and picked something up in its mouth. Then it walked back and dropped it at Mira's feet. It was a metal bowl. Inside the bowl were chunks of some kind of dried meat. The dragon's food ration, Mira realized. The dragon pushed the bowl toward her with its snout. "Oh no," Mira said. "I cannot take your food. You need to eat." The dragon pushed the bowl closer. It made an insistent sound. Mira looked at the dragon, then at the bowl, then back at the dragon. "Are you sure?" The dragon nodded its massive head. Mira had never seen a dragon nod before, but there was no mistaking the gesture. She picked up a piece of the dried meat. It was tough and did not smell very good, but she had eaten worse during the hard years after the collapse. She bit off a piece and chewed. It tasted like leather soaked in salt, but it was food. "Thank you," she said. "You are very kind." She ate half of the meat and then pushed the bowl back toward the dragon. "You have the rest. We share." The dragon looked at the bowl, then at Mira. Then it bent down and ate the remaining meat in one bite. When it was finished, it lay down beside Mira. Not close enough to trap her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from its huge body. Mira sat down with her back against the wall. She was tired. The day had been long and frightening, but somehow, sitting here next to this dragon, she felt safer than she had since the aliens first boarded the Harmony. "My name is Mira," she said. "Park Mira. I suppose we are roommates now." The dragon made a soft rumbling sound and closed its eyes. Outside the chamber, guards Jiho and Hyunwoo watched through a small window in the door. Their mouths hung open in shock. "Did that just happen?" Jiho whispered. "I do not know what I just saw," Hyunwoo replied. 3 days passed in the beast chamber. Mira had not expected to survive even 3 hours, but here she was. The dragon, Calyx, had not tried to hurt her even once. Instead, they had formed a strange friendship. Each day followed a similar pattern. The aliens would open a small slot in the door and push through 2 metal bowls. One bowl contained water. The other contained dried meat for Calyx. There was nothing for Mira. The aliens expected her to be dead, or they simply did not care if she starved. Calyx always pushed half of his food toward Mira. She always tried to refuse, and he always insisted. Eventually, she learned to accept his generosity with grace. The portions were small even for one. Split between 2, they were barely enough to survive on. But survive they did. Mira spent the time talking. She had always been a talker, much to the annoyance of her late husbands, but Calyx seemed to enjoy her stories. He would lie down with his huge head resting on his front claws, eyes half closed while she spoke. She told him about Earth, about the green fields and blue oceans. She told him about her farm, about her chickens, and her one stubborn goat named Mr. Kim. She told him about her children and grandchildren. She showed him a small photo she kept in her pocket. It was creased and worn, but it showed 3 generations of her family standing together at her grandson's graduation. "That is Junho, my oldest," she said, pointing to a man in his 40s. "He is the pilot I told you about, and that is Hana, my daughter. She is a teacher on Mars Colony 7. The little ones are my grandchildren, Minseo, Bora, and little Doyun." Kalix leaned in close to look at the photo. He made a soft, sad sound. "Do you have younglings?" Mira asked gently. The dragon pulled back and looked away. But after a moment, he stood up and walked to the far corner of the chamber. He used one massive claw to scrape away some of the old straw. Underneath was the metal floor, and scratched into that floor were markings. Pictures. Mira walked over to look. Her heart broke at what she saw. Kalix had drawn a picture of 3 smaller dragons. They were crude drawings made with just claw marks, but the love in them was clear. "Your children," Mira whispered. "Where are they?" Kalix made a low, mournful sound. He tapped one claw against the metal floor in a specific rhythm. 3 beats, then a pause. 3 beats, then a pause. It took Mira a moment to understand. 3 years. His children had been taken from him 3 years ago. "Oh, Kalix," Mira said. Tears filled her eyes. "I am so sorry." The dragon lowered his head until it rested on the floor. He looked utterly defeated. Mira sat down beside his massive head and put her hand on his scaled cheek. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "We are going to get out of here, and when we do, we are going to find your children. I promise you that." Kalix opened one yellow eye and looked at her. He made a sound that might have been a question. How could an old human woman help him escape? How could she possibly find his children? "I do not know yet," Mira admitted. "But I will figure something out, I always do." The dragon closed his eye again, but he leaned into her touch just slightly. That night, Mira could not sleep. She lay awake thinking about everything she had learned. The Zalrian Empire used war beasts like Kalix. They captured dragons from their home worlds and forced them to fight in battles. The aliens had told the human prisoners this during their orientation, trying to scare them with stories of the terrible beasts that served the Empire. But Kalix was not serving the Empire by choice. He was a prisoner, just like she was, just like all the humans from the Harmony. The aliens liked to keep their beasts hungry and angry so they would fight more viciously. They wounded them and did not treat the wounds properly, believing that pain made them stronger. It was cruel. It was wrong. And Mira was going to do something about it. She looked at the door to the chamber. It was thick steel, locked from the outside. There was no way to break through it, not even for Kalix with all his strength. The walls were the same, solid metal designed to contain a creature that could breathe fire. But there was a weakness. There always was. The guards had to check on the chamber eventually. They had to open the door to see if she was dead yet. When they did, that would be her chance. The next morning, Mira had a plan. When the food slot opened and the bowls were pushed through, she made a show of groaning loudly. "Oh," she moaned. "Oh, I feel so weak, so dizzy." Kalix looked at her with concern. She gave him a quick wink. The dragon's eyes widened slightly. Then he seemed to understand. He made a worried, rumbling sound, playing along. Through the small window in the door, Mira could see movement. The guards were watching. "I think I am dying," Mira said loudly. She lay down on the floor and closed her eyes. "Everything is going dark. Tell my family I love them." She lay still and held her breath. She heard voices on the other side of the door. The guards were arguing in Zalrian. One of them wanted to wait, but the other said they needed to check. If the human died, they needed to remove the body before it started to smell. The locks on the door began to disengage. Mira stayed perfectly still. Calix crouched nearby, watching the door with intense focus. The door opened slowly. 2 guards stepped inside, their weapons raised. One of them was Jiho, the guard who had watched Mira treat Calix's wounds on the first day. The other was a guard she did not recognize. "See?" Jiho said in Zalrian. "The old woman finally died. The beast must have decided she was not worth eating." They walked closer. The strange guard poked Mira with his boot. "Should we tell the commander?" "Let me check first," Jiho said. He knelt down beside Mira. That was when Mira opened her eyes. "Hello, boys." Before either guard could react, Calix moved. He was surprisingly fast for such a large creature. His tail swept out and knocked the strange guard off his feet. The guard's weapons skittered across the floor. Jiho tried to raise his weapon, but Mira grabbed his arm. She might be old, but years of farm work had left her with a strong grip. "Drop it," she said firmly. Calix stepped forward and roared. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. It echoed off the walls like thunder. Both guards dropped their weapons and raised their hands. "Very good," Mira said. She picked up one of the weapons and examined it. It was lighter than she expected. "Now, you are going to help us." "Help you?" Jiho's voice was high with fear. "You are prisoners! We cannot help you! They will kill us!" "They will kill you faster if my friend here gets hungry," Mira said, gesturing to Calix. The dragon opened his mouth, showing all those terrible teeth. "Now, where are the other prisoners from the Harmony? Where is Commander Taiyang?" "The detention level," the strange guard said quickly. "3 floors down, but you cannot reach them. There are hundreds of soldiers between here and there." "We will see about that," Mira said. She looked at Calix. "What do you think? Are you ready to stretch your wings?" Calix spread his wings. They unfolded from his back like massive sails, spanning the width of the entire chamber. Mira had not realized he had wings. They had been folded so tightly against his body that she had not seen them. "Oh my," she said, "that is impressive." The dragon made a sound that might have been a laugh. It was a strange, rumbling sound, but his eyes seemed to gleam with something like humor. "All right then," Mira said. She pointed the weapon at the 2 guards. "You 2 are coming with us. You are going to show us the way to the detention level, and if you try anything stupid, my friend will turn you into charcoal. Understood?" Both guards nodded frantically. Mira looked at Calix. "Ready?" The dragon lowered his head so she could reach it. Mira understood. She grabbed onto one of his horns and pulled herself up onto his neck, settling herself just behind his head where the scales were smoothest. "I have never ridden a dragon before," she said. "This is definitely going on my list of interesting life experiences." Calix walked toward the open door. The guards scrambled out of his way. As they stepped out of the beast chamber and into the corridor, alarm sirens began to wail throughout the ship. "Well," Mira said calmly, "I suppose they noticed we are leaving. Calix, dear, I think it is time to show these aliens why dragons are not meant to be caged." The dragon roared again, and the hunt began. The corridors of the Zalrian warship were not built for dragons. Calix had to keep his wings folded tight and his head low to fit through the passages. Sparks flew from the walls where his scales scraped against the metal. Mira held onto his horns tightly. Her knuckles white, the 2 guards ran ahead of them. They had no choice. Calix's hot breath was on their backs, and Mira still held one of their weapons. "Left here!" Jiho shouted, pointing down a corridor. "The detention level is this way!" They turned the corner and ran straight into a patrol of 6 Zalrian soldiers. The soldiers froze for a moment, shocked at the sight of a dragon in the corridor with an old human woman riding it. That moment was all Calix needed. He opened his mouth and breathed out a stream of fire. The flames filled the corridor, and the soldiers scattered. Some dove into side rooms. Others ran back the way they had come. Their armor protected them from the worst of the heat, but their fear did not protect them from panic. "Keep moving!" Mira shouted. They charged through the smoke and flames. Behind them, more alarms began to sound. Red lights flashed along the walls. A voice spoke in Zalrian over the ship's speakers, calling all soldiers to arms. The beast had escaped. The human prisoner was loose. All personnel were to report to their battle stations. They reached a wide stairwell that led down. Calix spread his wings and jumped. For a moment, they were falling through open air. Mira's stomach lurched. Then Calix's wings caught them, and they glided down 3 levels in seconds, landing with a heavy thud that dented the metal floor. "That was exciting," Mira said, her heart pounding. "Let us not do that again unless we have to." The detention level was different from the upper levels. The walls here were darker, and the air smelled of fear and sweat. Rows of cells lined both sides of a long corridor. In each cell, Mira could see prisoners. Most were human, but some were other species she did not recognize. All of them looked thin and tired. "Where is Commander Tae-yang?" Mira demanded, pressing the weapon against Jiho's back. "Cell 47, Jiho said. "At the far end." They moved down the corridor. Prisoners pressed against the bars of their cells, watching with wide eyes. Some whispered to each other. Some simply stared in disbelief. "Is that Grandma Mira?" someone whispered. "She is riding a dragon," another voice said. "Are we dreaming?" a third asked. They reached cell 47. Inside, Commander Tae-yang sat on a metal bench. His face was bruised and his uniform was torn, but his eyes were alert. When he saw Mira on the dragon's back, his mouth fell open. "Grandma Mira?" he said. "How? What?" "No time for questions," Mira said. She looked at Jiho. "Open this cell." Jiho hesitated. "I do not have the code. Only the warden has access to individual cells." Calix solved the problem by simply breathing fire on the lock. The metal glowed red, then white, then melted away. The cell door swung open. Tae-yang stepped out, still looking shocked. "I do not understand. How did you survive? How did you tame the dragon?" "I did not tame him," Mira said. "I befriended him. There is a difference. Now we need to free the others and get to the escape pods." "Wait," Tae-yang said. He turned to look at the other cells. "We cannot leave them behind. All of these people are prisoners. If we escape and leave them here, the Zalrians will take their anger out on them." Mira nodded. "You are right. Open all the cells." "But I told you, I do not have the codes," Jiho protested. Calix moved down the corridor, melting lock after lock. The prisoners poured out of their cells. Among them, Mira saw familiar faces from the Harmony. She saw Yuna, the engineer, and Daehyun, the medical officer. She saw families who had been separated being reunited. "Everyone listen!" Tae-yang's voice rang out with authority. "We are escaping. Follow us and stay together. If you can fight, pick up any weapons you find. If you cannot fight, stay in the center of the group and we will protect you." The prisoners organized themselves quickly. Yuna found a computer panel on the wall and began working on it. "I can access the ship's systems from here," she said, her fingers flying over the keys. "Give me a moment." "We do not have a moment," Daehyun said, looking back down the corridor. "I can hear soldiers coming." He was right. The sound of marching boots echoed from the stairwell. Many, many boots. "Got it," Yuna said. "I have a map of the ship. The escape pods are 2 levels up in the port bay, but there is a faster route through the hangar. If we can reach the hangar, we might be able to steal a ship." "Can you fly a Zalrian ship?" Tae-yang asked. "I can fly anything," Yuna said with confidence. "It is all the same basic principles." "Then we go to the hangar." Tae-Yang decided. He looked up at Mira. Can your dragon friend carry us there? Mira looked down at Calix. Can you? The dragon rumbled thoughtfully. Then he folded himself down low to the ground. Tae-Yang, Yuna, and Daehyun climbed onto his back behind Mira. It was a tight fit, but they managed. The rest of you, follow us, Tae-Yang shouted. Stay close and stay together. Calix stood up and began to run. The other prisoners followed, a crowd of desperate people looking for freedom. They reached another stairwell. This one was wider, with a ramp instead of stairs. Calix spread his wings and launched himself up the ramp, his claws scraping on metal. They burst out into a new level and found themselves face to face with a full company of Zalrian soldiers. There must have been 50 of them, all in full armor, all with weapons raised. Halt! The company commander shouted. Surrender or be destroyed! Calix roared so loud that the walls shook. Some of the soldiers stepped back, but they did not run. They were trained warriors, and they had their orders. Open fire! Energy blasts filled the air. Calix turned his body to shield Mira and the others on his back. The blasts hit his scales and bounced off, leaving black scorch marks but not penetrating. Dragons were built to withstand fire, and these energy weapons were not strong enough to pierce his natural armor. But the freed prisoners behind them had no such protection. They dove for cover behind support pillars and overturned cargo containers. We are pinned down, Daehyun shouted. Mira looked at the soldiers, then at the corridor ahead. The hangar doors were visible at the far end, only 30 meters away. So close, but with 50 soldiers between them and freedom. Calix, she said quietly. Do you trust me? The dragon turned his head to look at her with one yellow eye. He made a soft sound. Good, Mira said, because I have a very stupid idea. Fly. Fly, Tae-Yang said. But we are indoors. The ceiling is too low. Not if we go fast enough, Mira said. Calix, on my mark, I want you to run straight at those soldiers. When you reach them, jump and fly over their heads. Do not stop until we reach those hangar doors. The dragon rumbled his understanding. He crouched low, like a cat preparing to pounce. Wait, Yuna said. Grandma Mira, that is insane. If he hits the ceiling, we will all die. If we stay here, we will all die anyway, Mira said calmly. I choose insane. She raised her voice. Everyone behind us when we charge, you follow immediately. Do not give them time to regroup. She tapped Calix on the side of the neck. Now! The dragon exploded forward. He moved faster than Mira had thought possible, his powerful legs eating up the distance. The soldiers fired, but their shots went wide. They were not expecting such speed. At the last moment, just before Calix crashed into the line of soldiers, he jumped. His wings spread wide, hitting 2 soldiers on either side and knocking them down. Then he was in the air, flying through the corridor barely 2 meters below the ceiling. The soldiers ducked and scattered. Some were knocked aside by Calix's wings. Others simply fell over trying to get out of the way. Calix flew straight at the hangar doors. They were closed. Mira realized this in the split second before impact. They were going to crash into solid metal at full speed. Break through! She screamed. Calix pulled in his wings and hit the doors like a battering ram. The metal shrieked and buckled. The doors exploded outward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. They flew through and into the hangar beyond. The hangar was huge, easily 100 meters across and 50 meters high. Dozens of Zalrian fighters and transport ships sat in neat rows. Calix spread his wings and glided to a landing in the center of the space. Mira looked back. The freed prisoners were pouring through the broken doors. Behind them, the Zalrian soldiers were trying to regroup. Yuna, find us a ship, Tae-Yang ordered, sliding down from Calix's back. On it! Yuna ran toward the nearest transport ship, a medium-sized craft with enough space for maybe 40 people. Daehyun, help get everyone organized, Tae-Yang continued. Wounded first, then children, then everyone else. More Zalrian soldiers appeared at the broken hangar doors. But now Calix did not have to hold back. He was in an open space. He reared up on his hind legs and roared, then breathed out a massive stream of fire that cut across the hangar entrance. The soldiers fell back, unable to pass through the flames. "The ship is ready," Yuna called out. "Everyone on board." The prisoners ran for the transport. They climbed up the loading ramp in a chaotic rush. Mira stayed on Calix's back, watching to make sure everyone made it. "Grandma, come on!" Taeyang called from the ramp. "We need to go!" Mira looked at the ship, then at Calix. "Will you fit?" The dragon looked at the transport ship and made a negative sound. He was too large to fit through the cargo doors. "Then I am staying with you," Mira said firmly. "What? No!" Taeyang started to climb down the ramp, but Daehyun grabbed his arm. "Let her go, Commander," Daehyun said quietly. "Look at them. That is where she belongs right now." Taeyang looked torn, but finally he nodded. "We will come back for you, Grandma Mira, I promise." "I know you will," Mira called back. "Now go, get them to safety." The transport's engines roared to life. It lifted off the hangar floor and turned toward the large bay doors that led to open space. Those doors were closed too, but the transport had weapons. It fired, and the doors exploded outward. The ship shot through the gap and disappeared into the darkness of space. Calix and Mira stood alone in the hangar. Around them, fires burned from the dragon's earlier attack. Alarms continued to wail, and from multiple corridors they could hear soldiers approaching. "Well," Mira said, "it seems we have made them quite angry." Calix made a sound that might have been a laugh. He looked at Mira, and she looked at him. They had started something here today, something that could not be undone. "Ready for round 2? Mira asked. The dragon roared his answer. The Zalrian High Commander Vexthor stood in the control center of his flagship, watching the security feeds with growing rage. An old human woman and a war dragon were destroying his ship from the inside. It was impossible. It was humiliating. And yet, it was happening. "How many soldiers have we lost?" he demanded. 43 dead, sir," an officer reported. "Another 70 wounded. The beast and the human have fortified themselves in the main hangar. Every time we send troops in, the dragon burns them. Then use the heavy weapons. Blast them into atoms." "Sir, if we use heavy weapons in the hangar, we risk damaging the ship's core systems. The hangar is directly above the main reactor." Vexthor slammed his fist on the control panel. "Then seal them in. Lock down every door and vent the atmosphere. Let them suffocate." "Already attempted, sir. The dragon's fire melted the atmospheric controls. The human female, she is surprisingly clever. She has been sabotaging our systems every chance she gets." In the hangar, Mira crouched behind the landing strut of a fighter ship, working on a control panel she had pried open from the wall. Her fingers were burned and bleeding, but she ignored the pain. She had watched her husband fix machinery for 30 years. She had learned a thing or two. "Just a few more wires," she muttered to herself. "If I can reroute the power grid, it will overload their weapon systems on this level." Calix stood guard nearby, his yellow eyes watching every entrance to the hangar. His wings were spread wide, making him look even larger and more terrifying. Several times, soldiers had tried to rush into the hangar. Each time, Calix had driven them back with fire and fury. But Mira knew they could not hold this position forever. They needed a plan. More importantly, they needed leverage. She finished her work on the control panel. Sparks flew, and the lights in the hangar flickered. Then, with a satisfying bang, the weapon systems overloaded. All around the hangar, automated turrets went dark. "There," Mira said with satisfaction. She looked up at Calix. "Now we can move without getting shot." The dragon rumbled his approval. He lowered his head so Mira could climb onto his back. Her old legs protested, but she ignored them. There would be time to rest when they were safe. "The control center," Mira said. "That is where we need to go." If we can take control of the ship, we can force them to negotiate. Calix tilted his head. How did she know where the control center was? I saw it on a map while Yuna was hacking their systems, Mira explained. I may be old, but my memory is still sharp. The control center is 4 levels up in the forward section of the ship. Can you get us there? In answer, Calix spread his wings and leaped into the air. Mira held on tight as they flew up and out of the hangar through the broken bay doors. They emerged into a wide corridor that ran the length of the ship. Calix flew through it like an arrow, his wings beating powerful strokes. Soldiers appeared ahead of them, trying to set up a defensive position. Calix did not slow down. He breathed fire, and the soldiers scattered. They flew past and upward, following the corridor as it curved toward the front of the ship. They reached a massive blast door. It was sealed tight, designed to protect the control center from exactly this kind of attack. Calix landed in front of it and examined it carefully. Can you melt through it? Mira asked. The dragon shook his head. The door was too thick, made of reinforced alloy designed to withstand even dragon fire. Then we find another way, Mira said. She looked around. The corridor here was lined with access panels and maintenance hatches. She had spent enough time on colony ships to know that every system needed maintenance access. If there was a control center behind this door, there must be a way for technicians to reach the systems that powered it. She found what she was looking for, a ventilation shaft. It was small, too small for Calix, but large enough for a person. A thin person. A person like an old woman who had lost weight from being fed prison rations. I am going in, Mira announced. Calix made a sound of protest. It was dangerous. I know it is dangerous, Mira said, but it is our only option. You stay here and guard this door. If anyone tries to cut through it or open it, stop them. I will open it from the inside once I reach the control center. The dragon did not like this plan. He made several sounds of protest, but Mira was firm. We do not have time to argue, she said. Besides, I am too old to change my mind once I have made a decision. Now help me up to that vent. Reluctantly, Calix lifted Mira with his snout, gently pushing her up to the vent opening. She managed to unscrew the cover and squeeze inside. The vent was cramped and dark. She could barely turn around, but she began to crawl forward, her knees aching with every movement. Behind her, she heard Calix roar. It was not an angry roar. It was a worried roar. She paused and called back through the vent. I will be fine. You just focus on keeping those soldiers away. She crawled through the darkness, following the slight breeze that indicated airflow toward the control center. The vent branched and split several times, but she followed her instincts and the flow of air. After what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes, she saw light ahead. She reached a vent cover and looked through it. Below her was the control center. It was a large room filled with screens and control panels. Maybe 20 Zalrian officers worked at various stations. At the center of the room, on a raised platform, stood High Commander Vexthor. Mira examined the vent cover. It was held in place by 4 screws. She had no screwdriver, but she did have determination and fingernails that were stronger than they looked. She began to work on the first screw. In the control center, Vexthor was shouting orders. The beast is outside the blast door. All units converge on that location. I want that dragon dead and the human captured. Sir, an officer called out, the dragon is not attacking. It is just sitting there, waiting. Waiting for what? That was when Mira's 4th screw came loose. The vent cover fell with a loud clang, hitting the floor of the control center. Every head turned to look up. Hello, boys, Mira said. Then she dropped through the opening. She was 73 years old. Her bones were brittle. Her joints were stiff. But she had not survived 7 decades of life by being timid. She landed on a control panel, rolled, and came up holding a piece of broken vent cover like a weapon. Nobody move, she shouted. For a moment, everyone froze in shock. Then Vexthor began to laugh. You? One old human woman? You think you can threaten us? I do not need to threaten you, Mira said calmly. She walked to the nearest control panel and studied it. The symbols were Zalrian, but the layout was similar to human ship controls. She had helped her pilot son with pre-flight checks enough times to recognize a few important systems. She found what she was looking for: environmental controls. Specifically, the controls for the command center's doors and life support. "What are you doing?" Vexthor demanded. "Get away from that!" "No, I do not think I will," Mira said. She pressed several buttons. The blast door to the control center began to open. At the same time, she locked down all the other doors in the control center and shut off the gravity generators. Suddenly, everyone in the room floated off the ground. Papers and small objects drifted through the air. The Zalrian officers flailed, not used to zero gravity. The blast door opened fully. Calix squeezed through, his massive body barely fitting. His eyes found Mira floating near the ceiling, and he made a sound of relief. "Hello, dear," Mira said. "I told you I would be fine." Calix flew up to her. In zero gravity, he moved with incredible grace, his wings propelling him smoothly through the air. Mira grabbed onto his horn and held on. "Now then," she said, looking at Vexthor, who was struggling to right himself in midair. "I believe we need to have a conversation." "I will never surrender to a human," Vexthor snarled. "Kill them both!" But the Zalrian officers were in no position to fight. They were floating helplessly, their weapons drifting out of reach. Calix positioned himself between them and Mira, his mouth slightly open, showing his teeth. "You are not surrendering," Mira said patiently. "You are negotiating. There is a difference. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to contact the transport ship that just left. You are going to tell them they are free to go, and you will not pursue them. Then, you are going to release all the other prisoners you are holding on this ship and any other ships in your fleet." "Impossible! You have no leverage." "Do I not?" Mira floated over to another control panel. This one controlled communications. She had been paying attention when Yuna hacked the systems earlier. She opened a ship-wide channel. "Attention all prisoners aboard Zalrian vessels," she said into the microphone. Her voice echoed through every corridor and cell in the fleet. "This is Mira Park. I am currently in the command center with my friend Calix. We have taken control. To all Zalrian war beasts, you are slaves no longer. Break your chains. To all prisoners, the doors will open in 30 seconds. Arm yourselves. Fight for your freedom." She pressed another series of buttons. All across the ship, cell doors began to open. In the beast chambers scattered throughout the fleet, containment fields shut down. "What have you done?" Vexthor whispered, his face going pale. "I have started a revolution," Mira said simply. "Now you can either negotiate with me, or you can deal with several thousand angry prisoners and a dozen angry dragons. Your choice." From all over the ship, the sounds of combat began to echo. Roars and screams and the sound of weapons fire. The Zalrian Empire had ruled through fear and cruelty for so long. But fear is a chain, and every chain can be broken. Vexthor looked at his officers. He looked at the screens showing chaos erupting throughout his fleet. He looked at the old human woman and the dragon who had started it all. "What are your terms?" he asked quietly. 2 hours later, Mira stood in the hangar bay of the transport ship that had escaped. Commander Taeyang had brought it back, as he had promised. The ship was now filled with freed prisoners, both human and otherwise. Species she had never seen before stood together, unified by their shared experience of captivity and freedom. Calix stood beside her, his massive head lowered so she could rest her hand on it. The other war beasts had been freed as well. They surrounded their brother, a family reunited. "The Zalrians have agreed to release all prisoners," Taeyang reported. They will also provide transportation back to our colony worlds. And he paused, smiling. They have agreed to help us locate Calix's children. The dragon's head snapped up. His yellow eyes went wide. It turns out, Taeyang continued, the Empire keeps detailed records of all their war beasts. Calix's offspring are being held at a breeding facility on the fourth moon of Zalria Prime. We will mount a rescue mission within the week. Calix made a sound Mira had never heard before. It was something between a roar and a cry, a sound of pure, overwhelming emotion. He lowered his head to Mira and pressed his snout gently against her chest. "You are welcome," Mira said softly, tears running down her wrinkled cheeks. "You gave me hope when I had none. It is only fair that I return the favor." "Grandma Mira," Yuna said, approaching with Daehyun, "the freed prisoners want to thank you. They are calling you the Dragon Rider, the woman who freed the beasts and broke the chains." "That is a very dramatic title," Mira said. "I am just an old woman who was in the wrong place at the right time." "No," Daehyun said firmly. "You are a hero, and we will make sure everyone knows it." Mira looked around at all the faces watching her, humans and aliens, young and old, all of them free because she had refused to give up, because she had seen a suffering creature and chosen kindness instead of fear. "I am not a hero," she said finally. "I am just someone who did what needed to be done. Any of you would have done the same." "But we did not," Taeyang said. "You did, and that makes all the difference." 3 weeks later, Mira stood on the fourth moon of Zalria Prime. The breeding facility had been easier to infiltrate than expected. Many of the guards had simply surrendered when they saw Calix and the other freed war beasts approaching. Now, Calix stood in a large open field. 3 smaller dragons, each about half his size, ran toward him. When they reached him, they collided with him in a tangle of wings and tails and joyful roars. Calix wrapped his wings around them, holding them close. Mira watched from a distance, smiling. Daehyun stood beside her, also watching. "You did a good thing," he said. "We all did," Mira corrected. "I may have started it, but we all finished it together." One of the young dragons noticed Mira. It broke away from its father and approached her cautiously. It was still larger than a horse, but compared to Calix, it seemed small and delicate. "Hello, little one," Mira said. "You must be one of Calix's children." The young dragon sniffed at her, then made a soft chirping sound. It pressed its head against her hand. The same gesture Calix often made. "I think you have been adopted," Daehyun said, laughing. Calix walked over with his other 2 children. All 3 of the young dragons gathered around Mira, making happy sounds. Calix watched them with his yellow eyes, and if a dragon could smile, Mira thought he was smiling. "Well," she said, looking at the 4 dragons around her, "I suppose I have a bigger family than I thought." Back on Earth, years later, the story would be told and retold. The story of Grandma Mira, who was locked in a cage with a monster and came out with a friend, who saw chains and broke them, who looked at an empire built on cruelty and said, "No more." The Zalrian Empire never fully recovered. The loss of their war beasts and the uprising of their prisoners broke their military power. Other species that had lived in fear began to fight back. Within a generation, the empire collapsed. But that is another story. This story ends with an old woman sitting in a field on an alien moon, surrounded by dragons, watching the sunset. She had told Calix once that she would figure something out. She always did. And she had been right.